The blood drained from Vaughn Mitchell's face when he saw the woman collapse near the food court, her body crumpling to the grimy mall tile like a marionette with cut strings. He didn't think he just moved, pulling his 6-year-old daughter Lily behind him as he rushed forward through the crowd of stunned onlookers. "Excuse me, I know first aid," Vaughn called out, gently but firmly pushing past a teenage boy filming with his phone. He knelt beside the unconscious woman, his EMT training from his military days kicking in automatically. She was beautiful, even unconscious mid-30s, with honey blonde hair spread around her head like a halo. Her designer clothes screamed money, but right now she was just someone who needed help. "Lily, stand right there, honey," he instructed his daughter, who watched wide-eyed, clutching her small stuffed rabbit. "Daddy needs to help this lady." Vaughn checked the woman's breathing, then her pulse present but racing. He loosened her silk scarf, positioned her in the recovery position, and spoke clearly. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, revealing striking hazel eyes that fixed on him with confusion. "What happened?" She murmured. "You fainted. Just lie still for a minute," Vaughn said reassuringly. "I'm Vaughn. I have some medical training. Is there someone I can call for you?" "I'm Avery," she whispered. "Avery Jennings." A distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit pushed through the gathering crowd. "Miss Jennings." I stepped away for 2 minutes. His voice was panicked. "It's okay, George," she said weakly. "This gentleman is helping me." The man, clearly some kind of assistant or bodyguard, looked suspiciously at Vaughn, taking in his worn jeans and the faded T-shirt that had seen better days. "She should be checked by a doctor," Vaughn said firmly, not intimidated. "Has this happened before?" Avery tried to sit up. "I'm fine, really. Just skipped breakfast, and lunch, actually." "Daddy helps people all the time," Lily chimed in proudly, taking a tentative step forward. "He makes my always better, too." Avery's eyes softened at the little girl. "Well, I'm very grateful to your daddy." George helped Avery to her feet, but she swayed dangerously. Vaughn steadied her with a strong arm. "You need sugar, water, and rest," he insisted. "There's a cafe right there. At least sit for a few minutes before you leave." Something in his tone professional but caring made Avery nod. "George, I'll take 10 minutes, Mr. Mitchell, Vaughn Mitchell, and this is my daughter, Lily. Mr. Mitchell, would you and Lily join me? I'd like to thank you properly." Vaughn hesitated. They were only at the mall because Lily's shoes had completely fallen apart, and he'd scraped together just enough for a new pair from the clearance rack. They didn't have money for cafe treats. As if reading his thoughts, Avery added, "My treat, of course." "It's the least I can do." "Please, Daddy," Lily looked up hopefully. "The lady needs more help." He couldn't refuse that logic. "All right, just for a few minutes." At the cafe, Avery ordered mineral water for herself and hot chocolates for Vaughn and Lily, plus a selection of sandwiches and pastries. Vaughn noted how everyone scrambled to serve her and how George hovered protectively nearby at another table. "So, Mr. Mitchell, Vaughn, please." "Vaughn," she smiled, and it transformed her face from merely beautiful to radiant. "Where did you learn first aid? You clearly knew what you were doing." 8 years in the Army. I was a combat medic." He watched Lily carefully bite into a chocolate croissant, trying not to get crumbs on her faded pink sweater. "Been out for about 4 years now." "And what do you do now?" Vaughn shifted uncomfortably. "I work maintenance at Riverside Apartments." "It's not glamorous, but it's steady, and they provide a small unit for us as part of the compensation." He didn't mention how he'd lost his better-paying construction job 3 months ago when the company downsized, or how he'd been struggling to make ends meet ever since. He didn't talk about the growing stack of medical bills from Lily's asthma treatments, or how he sometimes skipped meals to ensure she ate properly. Avery seemed genuinely interested, asking about Lily and listening intently to the little girl's animated stories about kindergarten and her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppy. "And what about Lily's mother?" Avery asked cautiously. Vaughn's jaw tightened slightly. "Caroline left when Lily was 2. decided parenthood wasn't for her after all. "I'm sorry," Avery said quietly. "Don't be. We're doing just fine, aren't we, Lillipad?" He ruffled his daughter's light brown hair so like his own. "Yep," Lily nodded enthusiastically, a chocolate mustache decorating her upper lip. "Well," Avery said, checking her watch, "I really should be going. I have a meeting I can't miss." She pulled out a sleek business card and handed it to Vaughn. "If you ever need anything, please call me. I mean it." Vaughn took the card reluctantly. "We're fine, really. But thank you for the treats." "Thank you, pretty lady," Lily added with a wave. As Avery walked away, flanked by George, Vaughn glanced at the card. It was elegant and minimalist, with just her name and a phone number. No company, no title. "Come on, Lillipad. Let's get those shoes and head home." Vaughn tucked the card into his pocket, never expecting to use it. People like them didn't mix with people like Avery Jennings, whoever she was. 3 days later, the ancient water heater at Riverside Apartments failed catastrophically, flooding 6 units, including Vaughn's. The property management company put them up in a budget motel while repairs were made. But after a week, the owner informed Vaughn that the damage was extensive enough that they'd need at least another 2 weeks. "I'm sorry, Mitchell," Mr. Greeley said, not sounding sorry at all, "but we can only cover the motel for 7 days. Company policy." "Where are we supposed to go?" Vaughn asked, trying to keep his voice level. He was standing outside their motel room while Lily napped inside. "Most of our things are water damaged. I can't afford another place right now." "Not my problem. You've still got your job. We need the maintenance work done more than ever, but the housing allowance is suspended until your unit is habitable again." After Greeley left, Vaughn sat heavily on the cracked concrete step outside their room, head in his hands. He'd been picking up extra shifts at a local grocery store, stocking shelves overnight when Lily was asleep, but it was barely enough to cover food and Lily's medications. His phone buzzed with a text from the grocery manager. "Due to inventory issues, we're cutting back hours this week." "Sorry." Vaughn felt the walls closing in. He had about $200 to his name, not enough for even the cheapest apartment's security deposit. He could ask his sister for help, but she was struggling with 3 kids of her own across the country in Florida. As he emptied his pockets, searching for loose change to count, a small white card fluttered to the ground. Avery Jennings. He stared at it for a long moment. No, he wouldn't call. He wasn't looking for charity, and what would he even say? "Hey, remember me? The guy who helped when you fainted. Well, I'm practically homeless now." But that night, as he watched Lily wheezing slightly in her sleep, the damp, musty motel room aggravating her asthma, his pride crumbled. He stepped outside into the cool night air and dialed the number. To his surprise, Avery answered personally. "This is Avery Jennings. Miss Jennings, this is Vaughn Mitchell. We met at the mall last week when you weren't feeling well." "Vaughn," her voice warmed immediately. "I was hoping you'd call. How are you and little Lily?" He almost chickened out, almost said they were fine, but the sound of Lily's labored breathing through the thin motel walls strengthened his resolve. "Actually, we're not doing great," he admitted, explaining the situation as succinctly as possible. There was a brief pause before Avery responded. "I have a guest house on my property that's sitting empty. You and Lily are welcome to stay there until your apartment is fixed." "I couldn't impose like that. It's not an imposition, it's practical. The house is just sitting there and you need a place to stay." Her voice softened. "Let me help, Vaughn, for Lily's sake, if nothing else." He looked back at the motel room with its peeling wallpaper and suspicious stains on the carpet. "I'd need to see it first, and I insist on paying something whatever I can afford." "Fine. We can discuss that when you get here. Can you come tomorrow morning? I'll text you the address." After he hung up, Vaughn felt both relief and unease. He wasn't used to accepting help, especially from practical strangers, but he'd do anything for Lily, even swallow his pride. The next morning, they took 2 buses to reach the address Avery had sent. As they got closer, the neighborhoods grew increasingly upscale until they were passing gated estates with long driveways. "Daddy, are we going to a castle?" Lily asked, eyes wide as their bus passed enormous homes. "Not exactly, honey. Remember the nice lady from the mall. We're going to see her house." When they reached their stop, Vaughn checked the address again. Surely there was a mistake. They were standing in front of massive wrought iron gates with a discreet J worked into the design. He pressed the intercom button hesitantly. "Yes," a male voice answered. I'm Vaughn Mitchell. Avery Jennings is expecting us." "Of course, Mr. Mitchell. Please come in." The gates swung open silently, revealing a winding driveway flanked by perfectly manicured gardens. Lily clutched Mr. Hoppy tighter as they walked up the long drive. "Daddy," she whispered loudly, "I think the lady is a princess." Vaughn was beginning to wonder the same thing. The main house that came into view was a stunning modern mansion of glass, stone, and wood. It wasn't ostentatious, but it screamed quiet wealth and impeccable taste. Avery was waiting at the front door in simple dark jeans and a cream sweater that probably cost more than Vaughn's monthly salary. Her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup, somehow looking even more beautiful than he remembered. "You made it." She smiled, bending down to Lily's level. "Hello again, Miss Lily. I love your rabbit." "This is Mr. Hoppy," Lily informed her seriously. "He protects me from monsters." "A very important job," Avery nodded with equal seriousness. "Would you both like to see where you'll be staying?" She led them around the side of the main house to a charming cottage about 50 yards away. It was small by comparison, but still larger than their apartment. "This used to be the caretaker's residence before I renovated the property," Avery explained, unlocking the door. "Now I usually keep it for out-of-town guests." Inside, the guest house was beautifully appointed with comfortable furniture, hardwood floors, and large windows overlooking a garden. There were 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, and even a small office nook. "The fridge is stocked with basics," Avery said. "There's a pool between here and the main house that you're welcome to use. The Wi-Fi password is on the counter." Lily had already discovered the smaller bedroom, which was decorated with colorful throw pillows and had a small bookshelf filled with children's books. "Can I stay here, Daddy? Please?" Her eyes were shining with excitement. Vaughn turned to Avery. "This is incredibly generous, but I need to understand what's happening here." "Why are you doing this for us?" Avery's expression grew more serious. "Let's talk while Lily explores." Coffee in the kitchen, as she prepared 2 mugs, Avery spoke carefully. "When you helped me at the mall, you didn't hesitate. You didn't ask who I was or what was in it for you. You just saw someone who needed help and stepped up." She handed him a steaming mug. "That's rare, Vaughn, especially in my world." "Your world," she sighed. "I'm the CEO of Jennings Innovation Group. My father founded the company, and I took over 5 years ago when he retired." Vaughn nearly choked on his coffee. Even he had heard of JIG. They were a major technology and clean energy conglomerate worth billions. "So you're wealthy?" "Yes. But also surrounded by people who usually want something from me." She leaned against the counter. "Your kindness was refreshing. And now I can return the favor in a way that costs me nothing but might make a significant difference for you and your daughter." Vaughn processed this information slowly. "I still need to contribute something. I can help with maintenance around the property, or actually," Avery interrupted, "there is something you could help me with. How are you with event first aid?" "What do you mean?" "I host a charity gala every year for the Jennings Foundation. It's next Saturday. We always have medical personnel on standby, but one just canceled. Would you be willing to fill in? It's a paid position, of course." Vaughn considered this. It wasn't charity. It was a job he was qualified for. "I could do that." "Excellent. And regarding rent, let's say $200 a month, utilities included. Just until your apartment is ready." It was far below market value, but it wasn't free, which satisfied Vaughn's pride somewhat. "Deal. But I'll also handle any maintenance issues that come up here." Avery smiled and extended her hand. "Deal." As she left them to settle in, Vaughn felt a strange mix of gratitude and wariness. People like Avery Jennings didn't usually take an interest in struggling single dads like him without a reason. He just couldn't figure out what her reason might be. The first few days in the guest house felt like a dream. Lily's asthma improved immediately in the clean, allergen-free environment. She spent hours exploring the garden and playing by the pool under Vaughn's watchful eye. Avery was rarely visible, apparently busy with work, though she did wave to them occasionally from the main house windows. On their fourth morning, Vaughn was fixing a leaky faucet in the guest house kitchen when a knock came at the door. Lily, who was coloring at the table, jumped up. "I'll get it, Daddy." Before he could stop her, she had flung open the door. "Hi, Princess Lady," Vaughn heard Avery laugh. "Good morning to you too, Miss Lily. Is your father around?" He emerged from under the sink, wiping his hands on a towel. "Morning, just fixing that drip." "Always working," Avery smiled. "Actually, I was wondering if you two might want to join me for dinner tonight. My chef is making his famous lasagna, and I hate eating alone." Vaughn started to decline automatically. This felt too much like crossing a line from professional to personal, but Lily beat him to it. "Yes, can we, Daddy, please? We wouldn't want to intrude." He began. "It's not an intrusion if you're invited," Avery pointed out. 7 o'clock. Nothing fancy. Vaughn couldn't find a reasonable excuse. "All right, thank you." After she left, he returned to the sink, trying to ignore the flutter in his chest. It was just dinner with their temporary landlord, nothing more. Dinner, as it turned out, was simultaneously relaxed and the most elegant meal Vaughn had ever experienced. They ate in a sunny breakfast nook rather than the formal dining room, but the lasagna was served on fine china with crystal water glasses. Lily was provided with a special booster seat and her own smaller portion. "This is the best sketty ever," Lily declared, sauce already decorating her chin. "It's lasagna, sweetheart," Vaughn corrected gently, "and remember your napkin." "Actually, she's not wrong," Avery smiled. "Lasagna is just flat spaghetti with stuff between the layers." Lily beamed triumphantly. "See, Daddy, flat sketty." The conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Avery asked thoughtful questions about Vaughn's military service and his transition to civilian life without prying into painful areas. She shared stories about growing up as the only child of a busy entrepreneur and her love for competitive swimming in college. After dinner, while they enjoyed homemade ice cream, Lily grew increasingly fidgety. "Daddy, I need to go potty," she whispered loudly. "Down the hall, first door on the left," Avery directed. When Lily had skipped away, Avery turned to Vaughn with curiosity in her eyes. "She's wonderful. You've done an amazing job with her." "Thanks. It hasn't always been easy, but she's everything to me." He hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at him. "Can I ask you something straight up?" "Of course." "Why are you really doing all this? The guest house, the job offer, dinner? You don't know us." Avery set down her spoon, considering her words carefully. "When my father built this company, he had a philosophy. Success means nothing if you don't use it to lift others. I've tried to live by that." "That doesn't explain why us specifically." She met his eyes directly. "Because you remind me that genuine kindness still exists." "Do you know how many people walked past me that day in the mall?" "Dozens. Some took photos. Not one stopped to help until you." Her voice grew softer. "And maybe I'm a little selfish, too. I have this beautiful home, all these resources, and most days, it's just me and the staff. Having you and Lily here, it makes it feel more like a home." Vaughn wasn't sure how to respond to such honesty. Before he could try, Lily came running back. "Daddy, there's a piano in the big room. Can I play it? I know Twinkle, Twinkle." Avery laughed. "I'd love to hear you play, Lily." "That piano needs more use." As they followed the excited child to the living room with its grand piano, Vaughn found himself watching Avery the way she listened attentively to Lily's haphazard rendition of the simple tune. Her genuine laugh when Lily hit a particularly discordant note, the gentle way she showed her how to position her small fingers correctly. For the first time, He saw past the wealth and status to the woman beneath Kind. Somewhat lonely, and surprisingly normal despite her extraordinary circumstances. That night, after tucking Lily into bed, Vaughn sat on the guest house porch, looking up at the stars and trying to ignore the warmth spreading through him whenever he thought of Avery's smile. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Vaughn continued working his maintenance job at Riverside during the day, taking the bus back to Avery's estate in the evenings. She had given him a key to the front gate and security code, making him feel strangely trusted. Lily spent her days at kindergarten, picked up by a car service Avery had arranged when Vaughn mentioned his transportation challenges. He'd initially refused this additional help, but Avery had framed it as a safety measure rather than charity, and he'd reluctantly agreed. They had dinner with Avery twice more that week, once in her home, and once when she brought takeout to the guest house, arriving in jeans with her hair in a messy bun, looking nothing like the billionaire CEO she was. On Friday afternoon, Vaughn received a package at the guest house. Inside was a tailored black suit, white dress shirt, and polished shoes with a note. For tomorrow's gala. The first aid team wears this uniform. 7 p.m. start. The suit fit perfectly, making Vaughn wonder how she'd guessed his measurements so accurately. There was also a smaller box containing a pretty blue dress for Lily, with a note explaining that staff children were welcome in the designated kids area with professional childcare. The night of the gala, Vaughn felt distinctly out of place as he walked through the service entrance of Avery's mansion. The main house had been transformed, the already beautiful spaces now glittering with subtle decorations, lighting, and flowers. A coordinator directed him to a small room where 3 other medical professionals were gathered, a doctor and 2 nurses. They welcomed him warmly, explaining the protocols and giving him a tour of the first aid stations positioned discreetly throughout the venue. Lily was thrilled to discover the children's area, complete with movies, games, and arts and crafts. "Daddy, they have a real popcorn machine," she whispered excitedly. "Be good, Lilipad. I'll check on you when I can." As guests began to arrive, celebrities, business leaders, and politicians among them, Vaughn stayed in the background, monitoring the crowd professionally while marveling at this glimpse into another world. He spotted Avery immediately when she made her entrance. She wore a stunning emerald gown that complemented her eyes, her hair swept up in an elegant style that revealed the graceful line of her neck. She moved through the crowd confidently, greeting guests with warm smiles and firm handshakes. Several times during the evening, their eyes met across the room. She would smile briefly before returning to her conversations, but each glance sent an electric current through Vaughn. Around 10 o'clock, an elderly gentleman became dizzy from the heat of the crowded ballroom. Vaughn responded quickly, helping him to a quiet area and checking his vitals. It was nothing serious, mild dehydration and fatigue, but the man's wife was extremely grateful. "Thank you, young man," she said, patting Vaughn's arm. "Such a comfort to have competent medical staff on hand." As Vaughn handed the gentleman a glass of water, he noticed Avery watching from nearby, approval evident in her expression. Later, after checking on a sleeping Lily in the children's area, Vaughn stepped onto a balcony for a moment of quiet. The night was clear, the air cool after the warmth of the crowded rooms. "Hiding out," came Avery's voice from behind him. He turned to find her smiling, a champagne flute in her hand. "Just getting some air. It's quite an event you've put together." "It's for a good cause." The foundation funds veteran support programs, among other things. Vaughn raised an eyebrow. "You never mentioned that. Would it have made a difference?" "Maybe." He leaned against the stone balustrade. "You look beautiful tonight," he said quietly, the words escaping before he could think better of them. In the moonlight, he could see a soft blush color her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, looking out over the illuminated gardens. "Vaughn," Avery began hesitantly, I've been meaning to ask you something. What's that? Your apartment repairs. How much longer will they take? The question brought reality crashing back. Another week, according to my last update. Why are you needing the guest house? No, nothing like that. She set her glass down on the balustrade. I just wondered if you and Lily might consider staying longer. After the repairs are done, I mean. Vaughn stared at her, confused. Why would we do that? Avery took a deep breath. Because I enjoy having you both here. Because Lily lights up this place like nothing else ever has. Because... She met his eyes directly. Because I think there might be something here between us worth exploring. The words hung in the air between them. Vaughn felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Avery, we're from completely different worlds. He gestured toward the opulent party behind them. All this. I'm a maintenance man with a 6-year-old daughter and more month than money most of the time. Do you think I care about that? She asked softly, stepping closer. I've dated wealthy men who looked perfect on paper, men with the right background, the right connections, the right portfolio. And none of them, not one, would have stopped to help a stranger in a mall. She was close enough now that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and floral. None of them would have insisted on fixing my guest house sink rather than calling a plumber. None of them would have sat patiently teaching their daughter to use proper table manners while still letting her be a child. Avery. His voice was rough with emotion. I'm not asking for any promises, she continued. Just time to see if what I'm feeling is real. Time for you to decide if you could ever see me as just Avery, not Miss Jennings, the CEO. Vaughn reached out slowly, tentatively taking her hand in his. Her skin was soft, but her grip was firm, the hand of a woman accustomed to taking control of her own destiny. I already see you, Avery, he said quietly. I see someone kind, brilliant, and surprisingly normal despite all this. He gestured to the mansion. But I need you to understand something. Lily will always come first for me. Always. I would never want anything different, she assured him. She's an amazing child because she has an amazing father. Before Vaughn could respond, his radio crackled to life. Medical team, we need assistance in the main hall. Guest with allergic reaction. Duty called. I have to go. I know. She squeezed his hand once before releasing it. We'll talk more tomorrow. As Vaughn hurried to respond to the emergency, which turned out to be minor, a guest who'd eaten shellfish, despite a known allergy, his mind was racing. Was he really considering this? A relationship with someone so far removed from his everyday reality? Someone whose pocket change probably exceeded his annual salary? And yet, when he thought of Avery, he didn't see the billionaire CEO. He saw the woman who sat cross-legged on the floor playing board games with Lily. The woman who laughed unguardedly at his terrible jokes. The woman who looked at him like he was something precious, not because of what he could give her, but simply because of who he was. The next morning, Vaughn woke early. He'd carried a sleeping Lily back to the guest house after the gala, his mind too full of conflicting thoughts to sleep well himself. At sunrise, he slipped out for a run around the expansive grounds, hoping the physical exertion would clear his head. As he rounded the path near the pool, he spotted Avery in the water, swimming powerful laps with graceful precision. He slowed, watching her athletic form cutting through the water. When she reached the edge and pulled herself up, she spotted him. Morning, she called, wrapping a towel around her shoulders. Early riser, too. Military habit, he explained, approaching the pool. Never could sleep past dawn, even after I got out. She gestured to a nearby table with a coffee carafe. Join me. Over coffee, with the early morning sun painting the garden in soft gold, they talked. Really talked, with the kind of honesty that only seems possible in those liminal hours before the world fully wakes. Vaughn told her about his childhood in a working-class neighborhood, his decision to join the army to escape limited opportunities, the horrors he'd seen as a medic in Afghanistan. He spoke of meeting Caroline during his last deployment, their whirlwind romance and hasty marriage, and her gradual disillusionment with military life, and then with parenthood. After she left, I was lost for a while, he admitted. If it hadn't been for Lily needing me, I might have gone under completely. Avery listened without interruption, her eyes compassionate but not pitying. When it was her turn, she spoke of the pressure of being Jameson Jennings' only child, her determination to prove herself worthy of the company leadership, and the personal sacrifices that entailed. I've been so focused on living up to my father's legacy that I neglected building a life of my own, she confessed. My last real relationship ended 3 years ago. Since then, it's just been occasional dates that never go anywhere. Why not? Vaughn asked. She looked away, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Because I never know if they want me or what I represent. My wealth, my connections, my company, it's hard to separate the person from the package. I can understand that, he said softly. But for what it's worth, I liked you before I knew you owned half of Silicon Valley. That made her laugh, the sound bright in the morning air. Hardly half, maybe a quarter at most. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a barrier falling away. Vaughn realized with sudden clarity that despite their different circumstances, they shared a fundamental loneliness, a hunger for genuine connection in a world that often valued appearances over substance. Avery, he began, reaching for her hand across the table. I don't know if this can work. The differences in our lives are real, and they won't just disappear because we wish they would, but I'd like to try, slowly. Her fingers intertwined with his, warm and certain. Slowly, she agreed, one day at a time. The sound of small feet padding across the terrace interrupted them. Daddy. You're not in bed. Lily appeared, still in her pajamas, Mr. Hoppy dangling from one hand. Good morning, sunshine, Vaughn smiled, releasing Avery's hand to lift his daughter onto his lap. Did you have good dreams? I dreamed we lived in a castle with Princess Avery forever and ever, Lily announced, completely unaware of the charged moment she'd interrupted. Avery choked slightly on her coffee, while Vaughn felt his ears redden. Lily, miss. Jennings is just our friend who's letting us stay in her guest house for a while. Lily looked unconvinced. But she looks at you like Cinderella looks at the prince in my book. Now it was Avery's turn to blush furiously. Who wants pancakes? She asked, changing the subject with admirable composure. I was about to make some. You cook. Vaughn couldn't hide his surprise. I'm a woman of many talents, Mr. Mitchell, she replied with a wink. Not all of them related to corporate takeovers. Over the next 2 weeks, as Vaughn's apartment repairs stretched on, he suspected Avery might have something to do with the delays, though she denied it. They settled into a new routine. Vaughn continued his maintenance job, but Avery offered him additional work managing the upkeep of her estate, a position that came with significantly better pay and flexible hours that allowed him to be more present for Lily. They had dinner together most evenings, sometimes with Avery joining them in the guest house, sometimes in the main house kitchen rather than the formal dining room. On weekends, they explored the estate's grounds, went swimming, or took day trips to nearby attractions. It was during one such trip to a local botanical garden that Vaughn first kissed her. They were watching Lily feed ducks by a pond, standing close together on a small footbridge, when Avery made a quiet observation about how peaceful it was. I could get used to days like this, she said softly. So could I, Vaughn replied, and when she turned to look at him, the sunlight catching in her hair and her eyes bright with happiness, he couldn't resist anymore. He leaned down, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Their lips met in a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened as she stepped closer, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. When they broke apart, they were both slightly breathless. I've been wanting to do that for a while, he admitted. What took you so long? She teased, her smile radiant. From the pond, Lily called, Daddy? Avery, come see the baby ducks. Hand in hand, they walked to join her, both acutely aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. That evening, after Lily was asleep, they sat talking on the porch of the guest house, discussing what this new development meant. I want to be clear about something, Vaughn said seriously. I'm not interested in being kept. Whatever happens between us, I need to stand on my own feet. I understand that, Avery nodded. But you need to understand something too. I have resources, and sometimes I'm going to want to use them to make life better for you and Lily. Not because I think you can't provide, but because I care about you both. They reached a compromise. Vaughn would accept the estate manager position with a fair market salary. He would continue paying reduced rent for the guest house. Avery would not lavish expensive gifts on them, but she could offer experiences trips, special outings, educational opportunities for Lily within reason. As weeks turned to months, their relationship deepened. Vaughn was continually surprised by Avery's normalcy. Despite her extraordinary circumstances, her preference for takeout in sweatpants over fancy restaurants. Her terrible singing voice that she unleashed with abandon when she thought no one was listening. Her competitive streak when playing board games with Lily. For her part, Avery found in Vaughn something she'd never experienced: unconditional acceptance. He wasn't impressed by her wealth or intimidated by her success. He challenged her when she worked too much, made her laugh when she was stressed, and showed her that family could be built, not just born into. Lily blossomed in their new life, her asthma well controlled with proper medical care that Avery insisted on providing. She started piano lessons with a renowned teacher who came to the house, developed a passion for painting, and grew increasingly attached to Avery, who never tried to replace her absent mother, but instead created her own special relationship with the child. 6 months after that fateful day at the mall, Vaughn's apartment was finally repaired. He took Avery to see it, standing in the small, clean but basic unit that had once been their home. "We could move back," he said, looking around at the familiar space that now seemed impossibly cramped and dull. "Save you the inconvenience of having us underfoot all the time." Avery took his hand, her expression serious. "Is that what you want?" "No," he admitted. "But I need to know it's what you want to us staying, not just because you're too kind to ask us to leave." She laughed then, the sound bouncing off the bare walls. "Vaughn Mitchell, for an intelligent man, you can be remarkably dense sometimes." She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I'm in love with you, with both of you. The house feels empty when you're not there. I check the time constantly when you're at work, counting the minutes until you'll be home." "Home," he repeated, the word catching in his throat. "Yes, home. Our home, if you want it to be." He kissed her then, pouring all his feelings into the embrace: his gratitude for her generosity, his admiration for her strength and kindness, and most of all, his love, which had grown so gradually, and yet so inevitably that he couldn't pinpoint when exactly she had become essential to his happiness. "I love you too," he murmured against her lips. "But are you sure? Taking on a ready-made family is a lot." She pulled back slightly, meeting his gaze steadily. "I've never been more sure of anything. That day in the mall wasn't an accident, Vaughn. It was the universe giving me exactly what I needed, but didn't know I was looking for." 1 year to the day after they met, Vaughn proposed. Not with an extravagant gesture or expensive ring, though Avery could have afforded both, but with simple sincerity during a family picnic in the garden where they'd shared their first morning coffee. Lily, now 7, was their enthusiastic co-conspirator, presenting Avery with a handmade card that asked, "Will you be our forever family?" While Vaughn knelt with a vintage ring that had belonged to his grandmother. Through tears of joy, Avery said yes, embracing both of them as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, a fitting backdrop for the beginning of their next chapter together. They were married 3 months later, in a ceremony that balanced Avery's social obligations with Vaughn's desire for intimacy. The guest list included celebrities and CEOs alongside Vaughn's military buddies and former colleagues. Lily served as flower girl and best daughter, proudly escorting her father down the aisle before taking her place beside him to await Avery's entrance. When people asked about their unusual love story, they shared the simplified version. They met when Vaughn provided first aid to Avery at a mall. What they kept private was the deeper truth that in helping each other, they had found what both had been missing. A family built on mutual respect, genuine care, and the kind of love that recognizes worth beyond material circumstances. As they danced at their reception, Vaughn held his new wife close, still sometimes amazed by the turn his life had taken. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. "Just one," Avery replied with a mischievous smile. "I should have fainted in front of you years ago." "Better late than never," he laughed, spinning her in a circle that had her designer gown flaring out beautifully. "We have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." And they did just that, building a life that combined the best of their two worlds. They established a foundation specifically focused on supporting single parents transitioning from military service to civilian life. They expanded the guest house into a comfortable family home where they could maintain some privacy while still being connected to the main house. They traveled the world, but always returned to the home they had created together. 2 years later, their family grew with the birth of twins, a boy and a girl, who had Lily declaring herself the best big sister ever, and Vaughn marveling at the fullness of his heart. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep, and they sat together on their porch watching the stars, Vaughn sometimes thought about how close he had come to walking away from Avery that first day. How his pride might have cost him the greatest happiness he'd ever known. "What are you thinking about?" Avery would ask, seeing his contemplative expression. "Just how lucky I am," he'd reply, pulling her closer. "That day at the mall, I thought I was helping you. I never imagined you'd end up saving me." "We saved each other," she would correct him gently. And that's the best kind of love story there is.